They thought they'd gotten away with it. They left me at that grimy bus station like a bag of trash, $100 stuffed in my coat pocket, and a suitcase with nothing but old slippers and expired Tylenol. "She won't remember where she lives," I heard my daughter-in-law whisper, just before they sped off. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to wonder, was that the cranky old man next door hadn't just been watching from his window. He'd been recording. Every word, every face, every betrayal. My name is Ruth Halpern. I'm 77 years old, and until recently, I thought I'd lived a mostly quiet life. I have a modest little house with faded green shutters and a creaky front porch swing that moans like an old man in the wind. It's the kind of house that holds the smell of old books and lavender floor polish. The kind of house where time used to pass slowly, and nobody came unless they were invited. I liked it that way. Or at least I told myself I did. Since Harold died, 12 years now, cancer of the throat, I've kept to myself. I don't go out much. I read. I knit sometimes. I watch those British murder mysteries where everything is solved over tea. My son Aaron drops by now and then, usually with his wife, Jenna. They're always busy, always rushing. I used to make them tea too, though they rarely drank it. Aaron used to call me every Sunday. It used to be just him, and we'd talk for hours about the weather, his job, old movies. Lately, though, it's just Jenna texting, asking if I remembered to take my pills or to send over the utility account number just in case. People say aging is like becoming invisible. I think it's more like becoming inconvenient. You're still there, but now you're a burden someone has to manage, a spreadsheet entry. Still, I never imagined, never in my darkest, loneliest moments, that they'd go that far, that anyone could look into my eyes, call me Mom, and then leave me like that, alone, confused, erased. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't begin at a bus station. It begins in a kitchen with a fake smile, a too-tight hug, and a suitcase already packed. I used to think stillness was peace, that silence meant safety. Now looking back, I realize it was something else, something lonelier. My days began with the kettle. The same old stovetop one Harold bought back in '89 when we drove up to Lancaster for our 25th anniversary. A little chipped now, the whistle softer than it used to be. I'd make tea, Earl Grey, 2 sugars, no milk, and sit at the kitchen table with the morning light slanting through the dusty blinds. The house creaked in the same places it always had. It knew my rhythms, or maybe I knew its. The television was always on in the background, tuned low to the local news or those courtroom shows. I rarely watched, but the voices made the silence easier to bear. I had a routine: sweep the porch, water the geraniums, wipe the kitchen counters even if they didn't need it. It wasn't about mess, it was about motion, about feeling like I was still participating in the world somehow. Sometimes I would walk to the mailbox just for the sake of it, even if there wasn't any mail. Our street was quiet. Old trees, cracked sidewalks, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened, except maybe a new roof or a different car in a driveway. The only real disruption came from next door, Mr. Petricelli. He was a grouch, no two ways about it. Didn't wave, didn't smile. Just shuffled between his front door and his car, sometimes wearing those old military caps with faded stitching. He had cameras everywhere. Little blinking eyes on his porch, above the garage, even on the oak tree that leaned toward our yard. I used to tell myself he was paranoid. Now I think maybe he was just prepared. Stillness is deceptive. It makes you think things are okay because they're quiet. But quiet can hide rot. It can hide a plan. It can hide the slow dismantling of trust. And I didn't see it. Not yet. The change came quiet, like rust. You don't notice it right away. One morning, the kitchen clock is 10 minutes slow. A week later, your house keys aren't where you left them. A month passes, and the people who once smiled when they saw you start glancing at each other instead. Aaron started visiting more often, but never alone. Jenna always came with him. She carried her tote bag like she was coming to inventory a property, not visit her mother-in-law. She'd pull out folders, flip through papers, ask about bills I'd already paid, prescriptions I'd already filled. "I just want to make sure nothing slips through the cracks," she'd say, flashing that tight smile of hers. "You know, things get harder to manage with age." It wasn't cruel, not exactly. It was efficient, gentle even. That made it worse somehow. Like they wanted me to thank them while they quietly stripped me of my dignity. One afternoon, Aaron asked if I had thought about getting one of those medical alert bracelets. "Just in case," he said. I told him I didn't need one. I'd never fallen in my life. He didn't argue. He just looked at Jenna, then back at me, and nodded slowly. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my hands. They looked thinner than I remembered. More veins, more tremble. I tried to open a jar of strawberry jam and couldn't. For the first time in a long while, I wondered if maybe they were right. The next week, they brought over a pamphlet for a senior living facility. Not a home, they insisted. Independent living. Fitness classes, shuttle buses, movie nights. It sounded like a cruise ship without the ocean. I smiled and said I'd think about it. I didn't. But something had shifted. I could feel it, like a draft in a locked room. I was being assessed, weighed, and slowly nudged. Toward what, I wasn't sure yet, but I would be. It started with the thermostat. I'd wake up sweating, the room thick with heat, only to find the dial turn to 80. I never set it that high. Then it would swing the other way. I'd shiver in my bathrobe while the vents blew cold air through the house. "You probably just forgot," Aaron said one day, adjusting it without even asking. "No big deal, Mom. It happens." But it didn't used to. I'd been managing that thermostat for over 30 years. Then came the missing mail. A bill here, a flyer there. I thought maybe it was the Postal Service. Until Jenna mentioned something about my property tax letter, something I hadn't even received. "Oh, it came?" I asked. She blinked, just for a second. "I thought you told us it did. Maybe I mixed it up. No worries." They began offering to help pay the bills. "Let us take care of it. It's all online anyway." They asked for my login, said they'd simplify everything. "We'll just forward important emails so you don't have to worry," Jenna said. The next time I tried to log into my bank account, the password didn't work. I asked Aaron about it. He told me I must have changed it. "We'll reset it together next time I'm over," he said. But next time never came. And then there was the doctor's appointment, one I hadn't scheduled. A wellness check, they said. A new doctor, younger and more proactive. He asked me strange questions. Did I ever forget what day it was? Did I sometimes feel lost in familiar places? "I'm 77, I snapped. "Of course I forget what day it is. That's not dementia. It's retirement." Aaron just sighed and said nothing. Jenna scribbled notes in her phone. They were drawing a version of me I didn't recognize. A fragile, forgetful old woman who needed supervision. A woman I was beginning to doubt didn't exist. That's the cruelty of gaslighting. It doesn't just make you question your memories. It makes you question your worth. It was Jenna's idea, though Aaron delivered the news. "We booked you a little getaway," he said, setting down a brochure on the table. "Just a week, a spa retreat, out in the hills. You deserve it." The brochure was glossy, full of sunsets and women in white robes holding teacups. It looked like an ad for a tranquil prison. "You'll love it," Jenna chimed in. "And it'll give us a chance to do some work on the house, fix that leak in the laundry room, update the security system. Just a few things you've been meaning to get to." Something in me tensed. I didn't agree to any of this. Aaron leaned in. "It's already paid for, Mom. Non-refundable. We just thought it might be good for you. You've been so stressed." I wanted to protest, but the way they looked at me, It was as if my refusal would confirm everything they'd been hinting at, that I was irrational, resistant, difficult. So I nodded. Like a fool, I nodded. The next day, Jenna showed up with a small suitcase already packed. Clothes I hadn't chosen, shoes I hadn't worn in years. My favorite photo of Harold was inside, stuffed between 2 cardigans. Erin waited in the car, engine running. "I can pack my own bag," I said, gently pulling the suitcase from her hands. She smiled too brightly. "Of course, but we're in a bit of a rush. The check-in window is strict." I looked at the clock. It was barely 9 in the morning. We drove in near silence. The hills gave way to flat roads, then freeways, then city blocks. The brochure said the spa was in the countryside, but there were no trees here, no soft light, just gray sidewalks and honking horns. "We're just stopping here real quick," Jenna said, unbuckling her seatbelt as we pulled into the parking lot of a rundown bus station. Aaron didn't turn around. He just stared ahead. My stomach dropped. Something was very wrong. I hadn't even brought my purse. Aaron popped the trunk without a word. Jenna handed me the suitcase and placed a folded-up bill in my coat pocket. "Just in case you want a snack while you wait, there's a little diner inside." "Wait for what?" I asked, blinking. She avoided my eyes. "The shuttle. It should be here soon." I turned to Aaron. "What shuttle?" He exhaled sharply, like he was exhausted by the question. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it is." Harder for who? I looked around. There were no signs, no attendants, no buses in sight. Just a cracked parking lot and a few loitering souls who looked like they hadn't slept indoors in days. "Why here?" I asked, voice small. Jenna stepped back. "We thought this would be easier, cleaner. You've been so overwhelmed lately." I stared at her, then him. "Overwhelmed?" "You forgot the microwave last week," Aaron said. "You left it running with nothing inside. The house could have caught fire." "That was one time, one mistake." "Still, we can't keep ignoring the signs." "What signs?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the trunk, got back in the car, and pulled the door shut. Jenna hesitated just a moment longer. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Hurry up, before someone sees." The car sped off. And just like that, I was standing in a parking lot with a suitcase I hadn't packed, $100 in my pocket, and a head full of questions that would never get answers. I walked into the station, the smell of grease and bleach slapping me in the face. No one looked up. No one cared. I sat on a plastic bench, the kind that pinches your thighs if you shift too much. My hands were shaking. For a moment, I wondered if I really had lost it. Maybe I had agreed to this. Maybe I was the one who had forgotten. But when I opened the suitcase and saw Harold's photo, stuffed between mothball-scented clothes, something inside me cracked. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had erased me. And somewhere, deep behind a curtain next door, a red light blinked on a camera, recording everything. The bench dug into my spine as I sat there trying to breathe. Time didn't move in that bus station. It sagged. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it was the other way around. I watched people come and go, watched the light outside shift from gold to gray. No one looked at me. Not really. An old woman on a bench doesn't raise alarms. She fades into the wallpaper of public space. I had no phone, no house key, no address written down, because why would I ever forget my own home? The only thing I had was the $100 bill Jenna had shoved into my coat, like it was meant to buy my silence. At some point, a janitor with a crooked mop and kind eyes offered me a bottle of water. I thanked him, and for a moment I almost cried. Not because of the water, but because he was the first person all day who looked at me like I was still a human being. I didn't know what to do. Call someone? Who? My sister had died in Florida 3 years ago. The friends I'd once had in town had either passed on or moved away. I had no numbers memorized. Everything had lived in my phone. I checked the schedule board. No buses to my neighborhood, none even close. So I waited. I waited because I didn't know what else to do. My feet were swollen, my back ached, and the weight of what had happened hadn't even fully landed yet. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that they would come back, that the shuttle was real, that maybe I had misheard. But deep down, I already knew. They were not coming back. And for the first time in my 77 years, I had no idea where I belonged. That first night, I stayed at the station. I was too afraid to leave, too ashamed to ask for help. I sat upright on that hard plastic bench until my body refused to stay awake. My head slumped forward. I dreamt of my front door, of Harold standing there with a worried look, asking why I was late coming home. But when I woke up, the light was too bright, and the station was still there. My neck was stiff, my mouth dry. I used the restroom to splash water on my face, avoiding the mirror. I didn't want to see the woman I'd become. I used $8 to buy a stale sandwich and a cup of coffee. The man behind the counter didn't smile, didn't speak, just held out his hand for the money, like I was just another burden on his long day. I thought about the old woman in the news once, the one they found wandering outside a Walmart with dementia. She'd been missing for 3 days before someone recognized her photo. I used to wonder how that happened, how someone could lose everything and no one notice. Now I understood. I walked outside to warm my bones in the sun, but even the light felt foreign, like it no longer belonged to me. I sat on the curb, cradling my coffee, watching people with places to go and people to meet. I had no one, not even Aaron. I told myself I was strong. I'd lived through war rations, recessions, cancer. But there was something different about this. This wasn't fate. This was chosen, deliberate. He chose to leave me, and that hollow pit in my chest, the one Harold left when he passed, suddenly felt deeper, wider, now filled with betrayal instead of grief. I wasn't just alone, I was discarded. And somewhere deep in that emptiness, I started to wonder if maybe that's all I'd ever been to them. A weight, a chore, an obligation waiting to be erased. By the second day, I knew I couldn't stay at the station. I needed rest. I needed a plan. But more urgently, I needed somewhere safe to close my eyes. I wandered into a nearby strip mall, drawn by a dusty pawn shop and a motel with flickering neon letters. The pawn shop smelled like rust and lost dreams. I held Harold's watch in my hand for a long time before placing it gently on the counter. The clerk squinted, ran his finger over the worn leather band, then shrugged. 30. It had cost Harold nearly $200 in 1972. Make it 40, I said. He met my eyes, saw something there, maybe desperation, maybe resolve. Fine, 40. It wasn't just a watch, it was our anniversary gift. But I needed a room, a door that locked, a place where I wouldn't wake up to fluorescent lights and a janitor's mop. The motel clerk didn't ask for much, just the cash and a name. I gave both. Room 107 was nothing special. The bedspread was stiff, the air conditioner wheezed like a smoker. But the lock worked, and for the first time since they left me, I cried. Not the polite kind of tears that trickle down cheeks in movies. I sobbed. Gut-deep, chest-heaving sobs. The kind that leave you sore the next day. I let it happen. I let it all out. And then I cleaned my face with a scratchy motel towel, sat on the edge of the bed, and took stock. I had $52 left, no ID, no phone, no transportation, and still no one who would be looking for me. I opened the suitcase again. Inside, beneath the clothes I hadn't packed, was a small blue velvet box, my wedding ring. They hadn't sold it. Why? Maybe it was guilt. Maybe they hadn't wanted to touch that memory. Maybe it was just an oversight. But that ring, small and simple, became my anchor. I wasn't ready to give it up. Not yet. I stayed in that motel for 2 nights. On the morning of the 3rd, I counted out my remaining bills, $12 and some coins. Enough for 1 more night if I skipped food, maybe 2 if I begged. But I couldn't keep hiding. I needed answers. So I did something I hadn't done in decades. I asked for help. The front desk clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a lip ring, raised an eyebrow when I approached. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded too quickly. "I need to borrow a phone just for a minute. I don't have one anymore." She hesitated, then slid her cell across the counter. "You get one shot," she said. "I'm on break in 5. I called the only number I could remember, the library, the one near my house. Mrs. Compton, the head librarian, answered. She sounded surprised to hear from me, but not unkind. "Ruth? Oh my goodness, are you all right?" I told her I needed help. Not much. Just someone to help me figure out how to get home. "Of course," she said. "Where are you?" That was the problem. I wasn't even sure what city I was in. But the motel clerk helped. She gave Mrs. Compton the address, and before I could fully process what was happening, arrangements were being made. A church-affiliated shelter nearby agreed to send someone, a caseworker, she said, to check on me. When the knock came that afternoon, I clutched Harold's photo to my chest. The woman who entered was kind, mid-30s, smelled faintly of lemon soap. She didn't talk down to me, didn't rush. She asked if I had anyone to call. I shook my head. She offered me a ride to the shelter, a bed, a warm meal, a nurse on staff, just until we could figure something out. I looked around the motel room, its peeling wallpaper, its humming refrigerator, the sense of borrowed time. And I nodded, because survival meant surrendering pride. And that's what I did. I handed her the suitcase and stepped into the unknown. The shelter was a converted church basement, low ceilings, cots in rows, soft gospel music playing over tired speakers. It smelled of canned soup, bleach, and resignation. They gave me clean clothes and a plastic bin to keep my belongings. A volunteer nurse checked my blood pressure and offered me a sandwich I couldn't bring myself to eat. I slept that night beside a woman named Gloria, who snored like a lawnmower. She told me she'd once been a realtor. "One bad marriage and a few missed payments," she whispered in the dark. "And you end up with a number instead of a name." In the morning, the caseworker returned. Her name was Nicole. She brought me tea and a manila envelope. "I looked into your house," she said gently. I stiffened. "What about it?" "It was listed on a real estate website 2 days ago, under your son's name." The room tilted. "But I own that house." Nicole nodded. "We know, but your utilities were transferred to his name 3 weeks ago. And the county property records show a durable power of attorney filed last month." I stared at her. "I didn't sign anything." "You may have, or they forged it." She lowered her voice. "It happens more than you'd think." I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't move. My hands sat in my lap like they belonged to someone else, cold, still. "Do you want us to call the police?" she asked. I thought of Aaron, of baby powder and bedtime stories, of piano recitals and sticky fingers wrapped around mine. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." Because more than anything, I needed to know why. What had I become to him? A house to sell? A signature to forge? And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated. And if I didn't act soon, there would be nothing left of me to return to. The catalyst came with a knock. It was a Thursday. I was sitting in the shelter's common room, folding towels to keep my hands busy. The small TV on the wall played the news on mute. Nicole approached with her usual calm smile. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "From your street." My breath caught. "I didn't call anyone," I said. "You didn't have to." I followed her down the hallway, heart hammering. My mind spun with possibilities. Had Aaron come to drag me back under the guise of an apology? Had Jenna come to justify everything? But when I turned the corner, I saw him, Petrocelli. my reclusive, camera-loving neighbor, standing in the entryway like he'd been carved out of concrete, same navy cap, same set jaw. "You," I breathed. He nodded once. "Got something for you." Nicole gave us privacy and left. He pulled a flash drive from his coat pocket and held it up. "I have footage of the day they took you." My knees went weak. I sank into the nearest chair. "You saw?" "I saw everything. From the minute they loaded your suitcase to the second they drove off. I didn't interfere. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. But when they didn't come back, I reviewed it." He paused. "I heard what she said, the daughter-in-law. Hurry up before someone sees." My hands trembled. "And you kept it?" "Backed it up 6 ways. Sent a copy to my lawyer." He looked at me square. "This isn't just abandonment, it's elder abuse. Fraud. Maybe worse." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because I hate bullies," he said. "And because you may be quiet, but you're not invisible. Not to everyone." The tears came fast. I didn't even try to stop them. He sat across from me. "Let's get your house back." That was the moment. The first breath of fire in my lungs. The start of the fight. Petrocelli's footage changed everything. Nicole sat beside me as we watched the grainy video on her office computer. There was no sound at first, just images. Jenna hoisting the suitcase, Aaron unlocking the trunk, me standing there looking lost, looking trusting. Then the audio kicked in, that terrible sentence, clear as crystal. "Hurry up before someone sees." I flinched. Nicole did too. Petrocelli crossed his arms. "We can file an emergency injunction, block any sale of the property, force a court review." Nicole looked at me. "It's your choice, Ruth. This can all be undone, but you'll have to fight." I looked at the screen, at myself, frozen in time like a deer before the kill. "I'll fight," I said. That afternoon, we started the process. Petrocelli called his lawyer, a sharp-voiced woman named Judith, who didn't blink when he explained the situation. "I want you to represent her," he said. "I'll cover the retainer." I started to object, but he cut me off. "Save it. I've got pensions and no one to spend them on." I nodded, too overcome to argue. Judith was fast. That same day, she began drafting filings. She advised me not to contact Aaron or Jenna directly. "We don't tip hands," she said. "We build cases." That night, back in my cot, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. I thought of Harold, of how he always said, "Quiet people aren't weak, Ruthie. They're just saving their strength." Well, I had strength now. And I had a witness, and I had the truth. They had underestimated me. And in the stillness of that shelter room, I made a vow, not of revenge, of return. I would walk back through the front door of my house, and I wouldn't be alone. Judith moved quickly. Within 48 hours, she had filed paperwork requesting an emergency review of the power of attorney document Aaron had submitted. She flagged suspicious inconsistencies. The signature didn't match my DMV records, the notarization came from a shop that had since closed, and the date listed didn't align with any appointment I'd had. Nicole helped collect records. Petrocelli shared video backups. Everything was logged, time-stamped, preserved. I watched as my quiet tragedy became data, evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp cut through the fog. Clarity. Meanwhile, Judith asked me to list every document I remembered signing in the last year. It wasn't many. I had always handled my bills with a pen and a checkbook. No digital apps, no e-signatures. That, she said, would work in our favor. "I've seen a lot of forgery cases," she told me, "but this one's sloppy. They thought no one would look closely." And they were right, until now. Judith reached out to the county clerk. Within a day, we had a scanned copy of the power of attorney document. My name in block letters, my signature underneath, and a witness signature I didn't recognize. When I saw the name, my stomach turned. Jenna's cousin. A girl I'd met once at their wedding. She lived out of state. We had proof. I sat back in my chair, breathing slowly. It felt like looking at your own obituary, written by someone else. But Judith wasn't done. "There's more," she said. "The bank account transfers, they weren't just rerouted, they were emptied." I blinked. "How much?" "All of it." The room spun. I reached for the table to steady myself. "They moved it into a joint account under their names, 2 days after they left you." The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. But now I had something I didn't have before: a map, and names on every turn. Petrocelli wasn't what you'd call a warm man, but when he talked about surveillance, his whole posture changed, like a soldier returning to the battlefield, not out of fear, but out of duty. "This isn't the first time I've had to record something ugly," he said. We sat in the shelter's small library, tucked between dusty shelves and mismatched chairs. He placed his tablet in my hands and showed me the folder labeled Halpern. Timestamps, angles, clips I hadn't even realized existed, footage from weeks before the bus station, Jenna walking into my house with a duffel bag, Aaron carrying out boxes labeled documents. "You've been watching this whole time?" I asked. He nodded. "Motion activated. My system pings everything within range. Used to be paranoid, but turns out it pays off." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt exposed. But a bigger part, the part that had spent days wondering if I imagined it all, felt vindicated. "Why did you set all this up?" I asked. He leaned back. "Retired military, intelligence. After my wife died, I got tired of surprises. Started wiring the place up, cameras, microphones, motion alerts. It gave me back some control." "And you kept everything?" He gave a half shrug. "Hard drives are cheap. Trust isn't." That line stuck with me. We transferred all the footage to Judith that afternoon. She watched it like it was a court drama. She paused, rewound, highlighted. "This," she said, pointing to one clip, "this is the moment. Jenna says, 'Just sign it, Ruth. It's just for medical forms.' And you hesitate." I remembered that day. She'd handed me tea. I was dizzy, tired. "I think she drugged me," I whispered. Judith's eyes narrowed. "We'll get the toxicology report subpoenaed from your last checkup." Piece by piece, the story was coming together, and every piece was sharper than the last. Judith had a voice that made people listen. It wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that felt like stone wrapped in silk. The first call went to the district attorney's office. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't tiptoe. She laid it out like a hand of cards at a high-stakes table. "My client is the victim of elder abandonment, fraud, financial theft, and coercion," she said. "We have video evidence, forged documents, and a signed statement from a witness who can verify the physical handoff at a public transportation hub. We're prepared to go public, but we'd rather go legal." I sat across from her, my hands wrapped tightly around a mug of peppermint tea that had long gone cold. The assistant DA on the other end must have asked for proof, because Judith began reading off time-stamped events like she was narrating a documentary. When she finished, she looked at me. "They're opening a preliminary investigation," she said. "They'll contact you for a statement." That wasn't the only call. Next was the bank, then the title company, then Social Security. One by one, she untangled the mess Jenna and Aaron had wrapped around me. Each call chipped away at the lie I had been forced to live inside. Each confirmation that my name had been replaced, my assets rerouted, felt like someone stealing pieces of my identity. But now, those pieces were being retrieved. I was no longer passive. I was no longer just a victim. I was a plaintiff, a voice, a woman with representation. And perhaps the most startling part of all, people were listening. Petrocelli brought me a milkshake that night. Said it was tradition when a war begins, strawberry. It tasted like something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The next week was a blur of legalese and signatures. Judith was relentless, a storm in tailored slacks, wielding court filings and affidavits like weapons. She walked me through each document, explaining every clause in plain English. Not once did she treat me like someone fragile. I wasn't a victim in her eyes. I was a client, a fighter, someone worth defending. We filed for a temporary restraining order against Aaron and Jenna, barring them from selling, leasing, or altering the house in any way. Judith got a hearing date expedited. "They won't see it coming," she said, eyes sharp, "and that's exactly what we want." Nicole helped me write a formal statement. It was harder than I thought, putting betrayal into words, turning pain into paragraphs. I cried twice. The third time, I didn't. Petrocelli notarized my affidavit himself. "First time I've ever been glad to be licensed," he said. He didn't smile, but his voice was softer than usual. Judith filed a motion to freeze the bank accounts tied to my Social Security and pension. Within 2 days, the funds were locked pending review. She warned me Jenna and Aaron might try to contest it. "They're going to panic," she said, "and panicked people make mistakes." We also filed a petition to revoke the fraudulent power of attorney and reinstate my legal rights. The judge granted a temporary restoration pending further hearing. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. That evening, I stood outside the shelter and watched the sunset paint the sky in strokes of orange and plum. For the first time since the bus station, I felt something unfamiliar ripple through my chest. Agency. They had tried to erase me, but I had a paper trail, and a woman who knew how to make it count. Judith didn't just aim to stop the damage. She wanted to seal every crack they could crawl back through. She brought in a financial consultant, a quiet man named Daryl who used to work for the IRS. He wore sweater vests and had a memory like a vault. He reviewed every account, every document, every paper trail Jenna and Aaron had touched. "This wasn't sloppy," he said one afternoon. "They planned this for months, maybe longer." He found ghost accounts, small monthly transfers meant to fly under the radar. "Death by 1,000 cuts," he called it. They weren't just trying to steal the house, they were bleeding me dry. Daryl helped Judith set up what she called a financial fortress. New accounts in my name only, monitored for unusual activity, automatic alerts, transaction freezes. Updated PINs, fresh credentials, multi-factor everything. They also contacted the state's Elder Protection Office and submitted a full fraud report. With Petrocelli's footage, my affidavit, and financial records in hand, the agency opened its own investigation. But it didn't stop there. Judith had me draft a new will. "You choose who inherits," she said. "You choose who doesn't." I crossed out their names with a pen that didn't shake. She also had me sign a revocation of any prior powers of attorney, notarized and delivered by courier. "If they ever try this again," she said, "it'll be criminal, not just civil." By the end of the week, I had a binder full of documents, my name on every page, my voice restored in ink. "You're insulated now," Judith said, "legally, financially, and soon, publicly." I asked what that meant. She smiled. "It means we're almost ready to knock on their door." Judith believed in timing. "We don't just react, we control the moment," she said as she flipped through a stack of documents. "You don't just return, you arrive." The court date was set, 1 week away. Petrocelli offered to drive me. He was already coordinating with Judith on witness statements and backup evidence. "I want them to hear my voice," he said, "not just see the video." Nicole arranged a quiet room where I could practice reading my testimony aloud. The first time, I broke down halfway through. The second time, my voice cracked. The third time, I read every word with steel in my spine. "I don't want pity," I told her. "You won't get it," she replied. "You'll get respect." Judith asked me to record a personal statement, a backup in case I couldn't testify live. A videographer came with a small camera and soft lighting. I wore my Sunday blouse, the one with the blue stitching Harold had always liked. I spoke into the lens like it was a mirror. I told the story from beginning to end. The ride, the lies, the smell of that bus station, the sound of Jenna's voice as she told my son to drive. "I am not confused," I said to the camera. "I am not weak, and I remember everything." The videographer's hands trembled as he packed up. Petrocelli had one final surprise. "I updated my security system," he said. "New cameras, wider angles, audio backups, and I've saved everything. For years." "Why?" I asked. He paused. "Because people always think no one's watching, and I don't like letting bad people be comfortable." That night, I packed a small bag. Not the one Jenna brought. My own. With clothes I chose, with the wedding ring I refused to pawn. This time, I would walk into the courthouse under my own power, and I wouldn't be the one on trial. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. There was no panic, no tears, just a stillness that felt earned. I dressed carefully, gray slacks, a pale blouse, and Harold's locket around my neck. Petrocelli waited outside in his car, his usual scowl softening when he saw me step through the shelter's door. "You ready?" he asked. "I am," I said, and I meant it. Judith met us at the courthouse steps, clipboard in hand. She walked me through the schedule one last time, what I'd say, what they'd try to argue, where I'd sit. Her confidence held me up better than any cane. Aaron and Jenna were already inside. Seeing them again was like being punched in the lungs. Jenna wore a charcoal pantsuit. Aaron had trimmed his beard. They looked polished, composed, but neither would meet my eyes. The courtroom wasn't dramatic, no gavel slams or shouting, just quiet procedures. The judge reviewed the filings. Judith spoke with clarity and control. Then it was my turn. I stood. My hands trembled at first, but my voice didn't. I told the story plainly. No embellishments, no dramatics. I described the ride, the lies, the station, the missing accounts. I looked directly at the judge when I said, "They didn't just abandon me. They tried to erase me." Judith submitted the footage, the affidavits, the financial records. Jenna's forged signature was displayed on the screen. Petrocelli's audio was played aloud. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom was total. The judge took a deep breath. "Temporary injunctions will be upheld. An investigation will proceed. The power of attorney is suspended until further notice. All assets are frozen pending review." I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I exhaled, and I felt the weight of survival shift, from fear to something closer to strength. The first crack didn't come in court. It came the next morning. Aaron called Judith's office 3 times in under an hour, left voicemails, sent emails marked urgent. By noon, he'd called Nicole at the shelter, claiming he just wanted to check on Mom. She didn't answer. She forwarded the call to Judith. "I think he's realized this isn't going away," Judith said. Later that afternoon, a courier delivered a thick envelope to the shelter. Inside was a handwritten letter from Aaron. 6 pages, sloppy penmanship, torn corners. It read like a confession and a negotiation. He said he was sorry, that it wasn't what it looked like, that Jenna had pushed him, that they were under financial stress, that he thought I'd be safer in a facility, that they never meant to abandon me, just give me a nudge in the right direction. At the bottom, a final plea. "Can we settle this privately before it goes any further?" Judith raised an eyebrow. "He's scared." I held the letter in my hands, feeling nothing but a dull ache. No part of me believed it was about remorse. It was about control, about trying to reclaim the narrative. But the narrative no longer belonged to him. That night, Petrocelli showed me a new clip, fresh footage, Aaron pacing in the driveway, talking loudly on the phone, gesturing wildly. "You said no one saw us," he snapped into the receiver. "You said it would look like she left on her own." Then he said my name. Then he said Judith's. Then he said the words, "We're screwed." We both watched the clip in silence. Then Petrocelli hit pause. "One down," he muttered. And I couldn't help but agree. The first domino had tipped, and it wouldn't be the last. Jenna didn't panic like Aaron did. Not at first. She went quiet. Judith said it was typical. Control-oriented people often freeze when their power slips. But when the news broke, Jenna cracked. It was a short segment on the local channel. Elder abuse case sparks investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. A 77-year-old woman abandoned at a transit station. Footage submitted to the DA. A judge granting injunctions. 2 hours after the broadcast, Judith got an email from Jenna. Polished, professional, cold. She denied everything. Claimed the video had been taken out of context. Said I had agreed to a temporary retreat for wellness purposes. That I had signed everything freely. That the audio was manipulated. She even attached a screenshot of a so-called confirmation email from me, one I had never sent. Judith forwarded it to the DA's office. She's not just afraid, she said. She's in fight mode. But it was too late. Petrocelli pulled up archived camera footage of the day the email was supposedly sent. It showed Jenna sitting at my kitchen table with her laptop open. Alone. I wasn't even home. Nicole helped me prepare a response. Not legal. Personal. I wrote Jenna a letter. Just 1 page. I didn't accuse. I didn't insult. I simply wrote, "You underestimated me. But worse, you underestimated what I remember. And I remember everything." We mailed it certified. Jenna never responded. But 2 days later, her employer, a corporate healthcare chain, placed her on administrative leave pending investigation. I didn't celebrate. I sat with the news quietly. Because justice, when it arrives, isn't loud. It's heavy, and it lands in layers. It wasn't planned, not really, but fate has a way of setting the stage when justice is ready to speak. Judith needed a few documents notarized at the county clerk's office. I went with her. On the way out, we passed the courthouse steps. And there they were, Aaron and Jenna, standing at the bottom of the stairs, arguing in hushed tones. They didn't see me at first. Judith asked if I wanted to keep walking. I shook my head. I stepped forward. Jenna noticed me first. Her mouth opened, half surprise, half calculation. Aaron turned slowly. His face drained of color. For a long moment, no one said a word. Then I spoke. "Did you think I wouldn't fight back?" Aaron looked down. Jenna stepped forward, that polished exterior starting to crack. "Ruth, we never meant..." "To what? Abandon me? Steal my home? Drain my account?" Jenna bristled. "That house was falling apart. We did what we thought was best." "You did what was easy," I said. "You treated me like a burden. Like something to be managed and discarded. But I am not something." Aaron raised his head, eyes rimmed red. "Mom, we were drowning. We thought you'd be safer, cared for. That place, you didn't even check if I got inside." His mouth opened, then closed. I took a breath. "You had choices. You made the worst one." Judith stood silently beside me, her presence grounding me. I looked at both of them, really looked. They weren't villains in costumes. They were broken, scared people who'd made a monstrous choice out of fear, greed, or maybe just indifference. But that didn't excuse it. "I don't need you to apologize," I said. "I need you to remember that I was never invisible." Then I turned and walked away. Not because I was finished, but because I was finally free to choose when the conversation ended. The fallout came swiftly. Within days of our courthouse encounter, the media caught wind of the names behind the case. Someone leaked a snippet of the video, just enough to spark outrage. It hit social media like a match to dry brush. "Elder left at bus station by her own family," the headline read. Comment sections filled with fury. Hashtags trended. Advocacy groups reposted the footage. And suddenly, Aaron and Jenna weren't just defendants. They were villains. Aaron's employer issued a statement distancing themselves. He was placed on indefinite leave. Jenna's company revoked her clearance and opened a formal ethics investigation. Her social media accounts vanished overnight. Judith received inquiries from journalists, legal blogs, even a morning talk show. She declined them all. "We're not chasing drama," she said. "We're reclaiming dignity." At the shelter, I tried to keep my head down, but residents began asking questions. One woman recognized me from the footage. "You're the one who stood up," she said. "Good for you." I didn't feel brave. I felt unsteady. Petrocelli brought me a stack of printed comments from the news site. Dozens of strangers, writing things like, "My mom went through something similar," or "Thank you for showing us what quiet strength looks like." I cried when I read them, because for so long I thought my voice didn't matter, that the years had made me invisible, that survival was supposed to be silent. But now the world was watching, and in the wreckage of their lies, something true began to grow. Not fame, not revenge, just light, and maybe a little justice. Desperation doesn't knock, it barges in. By the end of the week, Aaron filed a motion claiming I was mentally unfit. He cited episodes of confusion, impulsive behavior, and evidence of paranoia. He even submitted a statement claiming I had once accused the toaster of spying on her. Judith didn't flinch. "This is their last shot," she said. "They're not trying to win. They're trying to muddy the waters." We filed a counter-motion with letters from my doctors, recent evaluations, and testimony from Nicole and shelter staff. But the worst part wasn't the paperwork. It was reading how my own son described me. Unstable, deteriorating, vulnerable. Not once did he use the word mother. Petrocelli was livid. "He's cornered. That's when people get dangerous." He wasn't wrong. That weekend, someone tried to access my frozen bank account. Twice. Both attempts flagged and blocked by the new protocols Daryl had installed. Judith sent a warning letter through her firm, making it clear. Further attempts would be considered criminal acts. On Monday, a private investigator showed up at the shelter, claiming to be checking on my safety. Nicole asked for ID. He had none. She called the police. He left before they arrived. "They're trying to rattle you," Judith said. "They want you scared, reactive." I sat in the shelter garden, the wind picking at my sleeves. For a moment, I felt 12 years old again, small, cornered, unsure. But that feeling passed, because fear is a teacher, and I had learned. "I'm not afraid of them anymore," I told Nicole. She smiled. "Good, because they're very afraid of you." It started with a freeze. The judge approved the motion to fully suspend Aaron and Jenna's access to every shared account, pending fraud investigation. What they hadn't expected was how interconnected their finances had become. Jenna's business credit card was tied to the same line as my home equity loan, one they'd opened without my consent. Aaron had routed a portion of his freelance income through a joint account listed under my name, likely to dodge taxes. When the account's locked, the IRS took notice. Daryl smirked when he saw the audit flag. "They built a castle out of stolen bricks," he said. "Now the whole thing's crumbling." We learned they'd taken out a personal loan for $35,000, using my property as collateral. The lender, notified of the fraud, began proceedings to seize their assets. Judith filed a motion to nullify all contracts signed under the fraudulent power of attorney. It passed. In 1 week, they lost access to their savings, their credit, their investments. Jenna's retirement account was frozen. Aaron's business license was temporarily suspended. They didn't just face court, they faced debt. Judith called it poetic justice. I called it consequence. And yet, even as the numbers fell apart, what struck me most was how little they seemed to understand. They thought they were being punished for taking money, but what they'd really stolen, what they'd never get back, was trust. Petrocelli dropped off a printed notice from the county. Notice of full property reinstatement. Owner of record, Ruth Halpern. I held the paper to my chest, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel poor. I felt whole. It was one thing to lose money, but what came next cut deeper. Their names became unwelcome. Jenna's book club disbanded without warning. Her closest friend, the one who hosted baby showers and wine nights, posted a vague status online about reevaluating the people we call family. Aaron's former colleagues removed him from group chats. A podcast he occasionally guested on quietly pulled his episodes. One of them even issued a statement: "We do not condone the abuse or exploitation of vulnerable individuals." Their neighbors stopped waving. Their dog walker quit. The local grocery store, where they once chatted with cashiers, suddenly became a place of tight-lipped silence and sidelong glances. People talk, especially in small towns. One morning, Nicole handed me a folded piece of paper. "Someone left this at the shelter desk for you." It was an anonymous note. The handwriting was careful. "I live 3 houses down from them. I saw what happened. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Thank you for having the courage I didn't." I held it in my hands for a long time. Shame is a quiet destroyer. It doesn't shout, it isolates. I imagine Aaron and Jenna watching their social world shrink. Invitations drying up, phones ringing less, no more curated photos, no more likes. Just the echo of what they'd chosen. At night, I pictured their dining table, once full of plans and people, now silent. 2 chairs, cold plates, and a growing awareness that some messes can't be swept under. They didn't just lose money, they lost belonging. And unlike finances, you can't refinance your reputation. You earn it. Or you don't. In the end, their world didn't explode. It withered. The sale of their condo fell through. The buyers pulled out after Googling their names. Jenna's parents stopped answering her calls. Aaron's college friends, once so proud of his quick wit and charm, began referring to him in the past tense. They stopped showing up in court. Their lawyer filed continuances, citing mental health strain. Judith wasn't surprised. "People like that are loud when they're in control," she said. "When they lose it, they vanish." I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a short message in Aaron's handwriting. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you understand. I was scared. I didn't know how to ask for help." No apology, no ownership, just fear, cloaked in sentiment. I didn't respond. What was left to say? Sometimes silence is the most honest answer. Nicole told me the shelter had been contacted by a reporter who wanted a follow-up interview. I declined. "This isn't a story," I said. "It's my life." Still, the city buzzed around me. People pointed at headlines. Strangers nodded at me in passing. One even called me brave. But I didn't feel brave. I felt emptied, like a house that had been looted and then locked up tight. Petrocelli helped me move back in once the court reinstated full ownership. He didn't talk much, just carried boxes, checked locks, and adjusted my front-facing cameras. That night I sat in my living room. Same creaky floorboards, same humming refrigerator, same silence. But it wasn't the same house. Because I wasn't the same woman. And in the stillness they once mistook for weakness, I had built something unshakable, solitude. And in it, peace. The first night back, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room of the house with bare feet, feeling the grain of the wood under my soles, the soft creak of boards that hadn't heard my weight in weeks. Each doorway felt like a question. "Are you ready to reclaim this?" I was. I made tea in my own kitchen. No one hovered, no one corrected, no one watched the clock. The walls, once witnesses to silence, now stood as proof. I had returned. The next morning, I opened every window, let the air sweep through like a cleansing wind. The curtains fluttered, the smell of jasmine from the front bushes drifting in. Then I did something that surprised even me. I went outside. Not just to the mailbox, but to the sidewalk. I walked 2 blocks, past the diner, past the church, past the corner where Harold used to wait with flowers every Thursday evening. A man nodded at me. A woman walking her dog offered a quiet smile. I smiled back. When I returned, I found a small envelope slipped through my front door. No name, just a card inside. It read, "You reminded us that silence isn't surrender. Welcome home." No signature, no need. I placed the card on the mantel. Later, I found myself humming while folding laundry. I opened the piano bench and touched the keys, though I didn't play. I sat in the sunroom and wrote my name in cursive on a blank page, Ruth Halpern. I said it aloud, no one to interrupt, no one to override. This was the beginning of something not new, but reclaimed. Freedom isn't always a flag waving in the sky. Sometimes it's just a woman sipping tea in her own kitchen and knowing she earned every quiet second of it. The days began to settle into a rhythm, not like before, but better. I started waking up with the sun again, no alarms, no reason to rush. I made oatmeal with cinnamon, sometimes toast. I let the radio play classical music while I swept the kitchen. It reminded me of the mornings Harold and I used to read the paper side by side. But this wasn't about recreating the past. It was about building forward. I bought new sheets, white with little blue flowers. I donated the clothes Jenna had packed for me to the church thrift store. I changed the locks. Petrocelli helped install a new front camera with a wider lens. Every night, I wrote down what I had done that day. Not because I was afraid I'd forget, but because I wanted to remember. I subscribed to the newspaper again. I planted marigolds in the front yard. The soil was hard, but my hands remembered the rhythm of care. Dig, place, press, water, wait. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years began waving again. Some stopped to talk. "Glad you're back," one woman said. "Wasn't right what they did." "I'm sorry I didn't check on you," said another. "We all should have noticed." I didn't need apologies, just honesty. Even silence, when it's real, can be healing. I started attending Thursday night bingo at the community center. I didn't win, but I laughed. It was strange, this quiet happiness. Not explosive, not cinematic, just steady, like a soft hum under everything, the kind of life they never thought I'd rebuild. But here it was. Here I was, not just surviving, living. It started with a blank notebook. Nicole gave it to me before I left the shelter. "For your story," she said, "even if you never share it." It sat on my coffee table for days, untouched. Then, one morning, I picked it up and wrote a single line. They thought they were writing my ending. Something opened after that. The pen moved faster. Words came in pieces, memory, thought, observation. It didn't have to be pretty, it just had to be true. I wrote about the station, about the suitcase I hadn't packed, about the way Aaron's voice had changed when he lied, about Petrocelli's silence and how even silence can be a kind of loyalty. The pages filled. I started waking up excited to write. I made coffee and sat by the window, the notebook open before me. What began as therapy slowly turned into storytelling. I remembered how I used to write as a girl, bad poetry, stories about farm animals who went on quests. I'd forgotten that joy, forgotten how much I loved finding the right word. Petrocelli asked me what I was always scribbling. I told him. He nodded. "Good. Make them remember who you are." At bingo night, one of the women mentioned the local library was looking for community contributors for their newsletter. "Just something monthly, a column, a story, whatever you want." I sent them a piece. 2 weeks later, it was published. They titled it, "Still Standing." The feedback was quiet, but kind. A few notes left at my door. A stranger stopped me at the post office. "Your words feel like a mirror," she said. That night, I opened the notebook again and wrote, "This is not a revenge story. It's a survival song, and I'm still singing." Healing is quiet work, but at some point, it turns outward. Nicole called one afternoon, her voice warm as always. "A woman came in yesterday, 74, same story, different names. Her daughter moved her out, changed the locks, said she'd be more comfortable in a facility 3 towns over. But the woman never agreed. I felt something old stir in my chest. Not pain, purpose. "Can I meet her?" I asked. "Already told her about you," Nicole said. "She's coming by the library Thursday." We met in the reading room. Her name was Martha. Her voice trembled when she spoke, but her eyes were sharp. She kept apologizing for being confused. "You're not confused," I told her. "You're being made to doubt what you already know." She cried then, and I didn't hug her. I just sat beside her until she stopped. Later, I gave her a copy of my newsletter piece. She held it like a life preserver. That weekend, I asked the library if we could start a small group. Nothing big, just a few chairs and a pot of coffee. A space for women like us, older, underestimated, still here. We called it the Thursday Circle. Petrocelli joked we sounded like a biker gang. I told him to be careful. We might form one. We met every week. Some talked, some listened. One brought photos. One brought muffins. One woman read a letter she never sent to her daughter. We weren't therapists. We were witnesses. And in that witnessing, something softened. We weren't fixing each other. We were reminding each other, you are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not alone. The world may forget us, but we remember each other. And sometimes that's enough to begin again. It's funny how one stone dropped in water can send out waves you never see coming. 2 months after the court decision, the city council reached out. They were starting an elder justice initiative. Someone had submitted my name. They asked if I'd speak at a town meeting. "Just a few minutes," they said. "Tell your story." I nearly said no, but I thought of Martha, of the woman in Nicole's shelter, of the folded note on my doorstep. So I said yes. The night of the meeting, I wore the same blouse I testified in. I stood at the podium with trembling hands, but not a trembling voice. I didn't speak about revenge. I spoke about restoration, about what it means to be erased and to come back inked in permanent lines. When I finished, a man in the back stood and clapped. Then others joined. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. Afterward, a woman approached me, maybe in her 50s. "My mother thinks no one listens to her anymore," she said. "Can I bring her to your group?" I nodded. "Please do." The next week, 3 new women showed up. One had just filed for guardianship over her own finances. Another brought her granddaughter. The third sat in silence and wept. The Thursday Circle grew. The library added more chairs. I got a call from a regional newspaper. They wanted to reprint my essay. Then a university professor asked if her students could study it as part of a course on aging and ethics. All I had done was survive and tell the truth, but somehow it made others braver. And in their courage, I saw a future I hadn't dared to imagine, one where old women aren't footnotes. We are headlines, and the story isn't over. There were so many things I could have written, to Aaron, to Jenna, to the judge, even to Harold. But the letter I finally sat down to write wasn't for them. It was for me. I used the stationery I'd saved since the 70s, cream-colored with a pale blue border. I lit a candle, turned off the TV, and I began. Dear Ruth, you did not imagine this. You were not overreacting. You were not too sensitive or too slow or too much trouble. You were betrayed, and you survived it. They tried to take your home. They tried to take your name. But they never took your fire. You endured loneliness that would have broken steel. You asked for help when pride wanted you silent. You rebuilt a life they thought they could bury. You were brave when no one was watching, and kind when no one deserved it. You remembered who you were, and when the world tried to forget you, you wrote yourself back into existence. And now, look around. You are home. Not the house, not the furniture. You are home. With love, the version of you who always believed you'd return. I folded the letter and tucked it into the notebook. No one else needed to read it. Some letters are not for answers. They are for anchoring. And in writing those words, I realized something I hadn't been able to say aloud. I had forgiven myself for not seeing it coming, for staying quiet too long, for hoping, even when hope turned to hurt. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others. It's a door you open so you can finally walk out. And I did. There's a kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore. I sat on the porch one evening, wrapped in a shawl, the sky turning dusky pink. The wind moved through the trees like an old friend. Birds settled, lights blinked on in windows across the street. Petrocelli sat beside me in his usual chair. He didn't say much, never did, but he handed me a cup of tea without asking what kind I wanted. Somehow, he always got it right. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." We watched the sun disappear. No court dates, no reporters, no calls from lawyers, just stillness, but not the lonely kind, the kind that's earned. Later that week, I walked the library steps and dropped off a new submission, not about what happened, but about what grew from it. They placed it on the front page of the community section. A teenager rang my doorbell to deliver groceries I'd ordered online. She smiled and said, "You're the lady from the stories, right?" I laughed. "Something like that." I don't think I'll ever fully be who I was before the betrayal. But maybe that's the point. Pain peels back illusions. What's left is solid. In the garden, the marigolds bloomed, bright, defiant little things. I added snapdragons. A neighbor dropped off basil seedlings. It started to feel like something alive again, not just my house, me. Sometimes I dream of Harold, not in that grief-soaked way I used to. In the dream, we're both sitting here side by side, not talking, just watching the wind, and I wake up smiling. Because even though I lost much, I kept more than they knew. And in the end, I found something they never will. Peace that doesn't depend on forgetting, only on surviving, and remembering that I did.